I'm Ashley Brown. It says Elizabeth, but I really am Ashley Brown. And I have two co-presenters today, Bianca Prince and David Blake, who his says Teddy Claypool, but that's David. We will tell you a little bit about ourselves, and then we're going to get to the best part, talking about ways that you can improve or start your own virtual book chat. As library staff, we're always looking for ways to continue to meet the needs of our patrons, especially during COVID. New challenges have arisen. With such a large group today, we've allowed plenty of time at the end for questions. So I believe Heather is going to help monitor the chat during the presentation, but we will definitely have time for questions at the end. So if you guys can hold most of your questions till then, that'll help us get through our content. So let's get started. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my library background. As I said, I'm Ashley Brown, and I officially have one of the longest titles at KCPL, and I wear many hats, as I'm sure many of you do. I'm the Government Documents Foundation Collection / Reference Librarian and Benedum Grant Project Manager for KCPL. And I've worked for KCPL for just over 5 years. I have worked in libraries for about 12 and a half years, both academic and public libraries. And after all of that time, I decided to go back to school and get my library degree. And I graduated from the University of South Carolina in 2018. So during my time at KCPL, I facilitated the book group chat at Sissonville branch for 3 years and initiated and co-lead the virtual book chat that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to hand it over to David to do his introduction.
Hey. I was going to say that if this didn't go well, to remember that it said Teddy Claypool, but unfortunately someone fixed that. So my name is David. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for having us. I'm the children's specialist at the Sissonville Public Library. I've worked for KCPL for around 4.5 years, and I've worked at the Sissonville branch since October 2018. In addition to my other duties, I currently run the book group at Sissonville, though we are not active right now due to COVID. This is the same book group Ashley ran for 3 years, and she left a strong foundation to build from. I was thrilled to join her and Bianca with the virtual book chat in June. I feel really lucky to be involved with such great coworkers and on such a fun project too. On more of a personal side of things, I spend my free time trying to hack NASA's control systems so I can take Curiosity for a spin around Mars. But let's just keep that between us.
And hi, everyone. I'm Bianca. Thank you all for joining us today. I have been working as a library assistant at KCPL for just shy of 3 years. I'm currently working on getting my MLIS from Clarion University, and I previously ran a student book club at West Virginia State University that met both in person and virtually on Goodreads. Ashley brought me on to the virtual book chat team in May, and I'm really happy to be a part of providing such fun virtual programming during a pretty challenging time.
Okay, so we're going to get started talking about how we got this started and kind of the process and challenges that we've had. As with all libraries in the state, KCPL closed due to COVID, March 16th, and many of us began working from home. I was one of those people. I did a reference chat via our website, did some other duties as well. And as part of that, I was still attending our programming and marketing meetings. And we started brainstorming about ways to do new programs and how this was changing the way that we do programs. And if you remember, at the beginning of COVID, it felt like it was changing every day, like what was going to happen, were we doing this for 2 weeks? Were we doing this for 2 months? How long were we going to be doing this sort of thing? So we were just wondering, how are we going to program during COVID? So we started brainstorming, And since I had been involved with the book chat at Sissonville, that was one of the things that came to mind for me was, well, we should try to do a virtual book chat. And, you know, we as a system had done mostly in-person programs. We hadn't done a whole lot of digital programming. We did some, but not a lot. So this was kind of a new venture for us. On the in-person book chat side of things, we had 17 book chats system-wide. So we had a really active and diverse book chat community. And so it seemed like we should try to do that virtually. So the idea came from my sister, actually. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm from North Carolina. I have a Southern accent. And her library in North Carolina, she was attending an in-person program before COVID, where they would drink wine and talk about books. And they just talked about whatever book they were reading. So it wasn't a specific title that they were doing, but just engaging and casually talking about books. So I liked that idea. I liked the idea that people didn't have to read a specific title, that they could just come and talk to other people about what they loved reading. So I sort of took that idea and was trying to figure out ways that we could do that virtually. So what I did was, you know, I thought about it and said, well, we don't want to limit it. I think that's a great idea because, of course, with digital resources, you know, we only have so many. People weren't going out in public to purchase books. So that seemed like, you know, people could read just whatever they wanted and then talk about it. I also knew that I was struggling personally just to read during COVID. I had a really hard time with COVID in the beginning and went from reading, you know, like 6 or 7 books a month to not reading at all or very little. But I still miss talking about it, to have a way to interact with people about that. So I introduced this to my coworkers and they thought it was a great idea. Social media seemed the best way to do it. You know, KCPL has a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account, but I'm most familiar with Facebook, and I felt like we have the largest following on Facebook, so it made the most sense to choose Facebook to do this. It was really easy to promote. I made a free flyer on Canva that I then put on Facebook, and I would just change the date every week. And the reason I just used the same flyer was I wanted people to see that flyer and immediately recognize that it was the book chat. So every week when they saw that come through their feed, that they would say, oh, here's the new book chat information. We did play around with, you know, how best to promote it. Do we promote it how often? You know, what time of day, and it was just kind of an experiment. As a general rule, KCPL tells us not to post on top of another post. So if I would go on there and somebody had just posted, then I wouldn't post again because, you know, for an hour or so, because it will get lost in people's feeds. So, and it was true that, you know, if somebody hadn't posted for a couple of hours and I posted about it, that I did get more views that way. So that is something to keep in mind if you do use the Facebook method to do this, to think about that. We would also post a reminder a few hours before the chat, just to give people a heads up, like, oh, remember, tonight's the chat. And David came up with the great idea of posting the link to the upcoming chat in the previous chat thread. So then those folks who had attended the previous chats would get a notification of the upcoming chat. So he had some good ideas about promotion, and that seemed to work too. Of course, when we started this, we were doing it from home. So this is something that you can definitely do if your library is still closed or limited hours and you're having to do some work from home. This is a really easy way to do programming from home. I picked Friday. I don't have any like statistical reason that I picked Friday at 5 o'clock, but I just decided that Fridays people were ready to do something fun. They couldn't go out anymore. Let's do a book chat on Friday evenings. And we had a good response. I did end up changing it to 6 p.m. once people's lockdown started to ease a little bit. It seemed that people needed a little bit more time in between work and joining the chat. So we did change it to 6 p.m. The first month that I had it, we had 61 participants the month of April. So we had a great turnout, and we averaged over 100 comments during that hour. So we had a phenomenal response. So we feel like it was a good method. And Bianca will talk a little bit here in just a second about some of the challenges with doing it via Facebook, but it seemed like people were really ready to have a book chat, and this was a good method for them to access it. So I'm gonna turn it over to Bianca to talk about some of the challenges that we faced and some of the solutions that we came up with.
Thank you, Ashley. Like she said, as with any new program, there are unexpected obstacles along the way that you have to overcome. And you can try to plan ahead, but many times you have to change your game plan as you go along to best suit the needs of your library, your staff, and your community. For example, initially we did start out with one main moderator and another staff member in the comments helping drive the discussion. But because of the weekly format, there were times when schedules just didn't align, people were off on vacations, things came up, and we quickly saw the need to have multiple moderators that could lead the chat instead of just having substitutes, because with substitutes, we felt that it might cause our chat to lack consistency. A substitute might not be familiar with previous chats. They might have a wildly different style of discussion, and that could disrupt the rhythm or flow of the chat. An added bonus is that our reading tastes are so diverse. That means that having rotating moderators has helped us provide a varied reader's advisory, which has been an incredibly important aspect of a non-title-led book chat. For example, David is a voracious reader, and he remembers small details from the books he reads, and he reads a lot. So the familiarity he has with all these different books really allows him to make interesting connections between books mentioned in the chat. And he also has a really great sense of humor that I'm sure you guys will pick up on, that really livens up the chat. My strength tends to be coming up with engaging questions as well as keeping up with the flow of the chat. I have previous experience with online book clubs, as well as experience managing social media accounts, so I'm pretty quick on my feet when it comes to responding. I try to respond to each patron, that way I can encourage conversation and make everyone feel included. Ashley is fantastic at taking care of the more administrative side of things and keeping the chat organized behind the scenes. She makes sure we all have access to the KCPL Facebook page. She works with our supervisors to make sure our schedules are organized and match up, and she promotes the success of the book chat in her meetings. And with our powers combined, we run a fun but organized virtual book chat. We worked together behind the scenes to come up with interesting questions that we thought would encourage a lively discussion. It was a challenge to come up with new questions every single week, so that was another great aspect of having multiple moderators. We could all work together. We researched general questions for book lovers, and we started out with some of the more general basic questions like, who is your favorite villain? What is your go-to comfort book? Who sparked your love of reading? Questions like that. We also based some questions on current events, such as asking if there was a book that had changed a reader's perspective on a specific issue. I personally also considered questions that I would enjoy answering. So one of our most popular chats included a question about which 3 characters you would want to have by your side during a zombie apocalypse. So it seems kind of like a silly question just for fun, but it actually really makes you think about the skills of your favorite characters. Would you actually get along with them in a stressful environment? Would all of your favorite characters be able to work well together? And for our upcoming October book chat, which takes place tomorrow, we've gone with a bit of a spooky theme to tie in with Halloween. For example, we're asking if you've ever read a book that has given you nightmares, or who would win in a fight, Frankenstein's monster or Dracula. And we usually end each chat by asking what our patrons are currently reading. It is a great way for them to share suggestions and provide their own reviews of books they've read recently. It has the added benefit of bringing together readers with similar interests. But one of the biggest challenges of hosting any kind of social program in a virtual format is facilitating a good connection among the participants. In person, it's easy for attendees to piggyback off of one another's comments or for one statement to inspire a new discussion. And an in-person book chat also helps foster a more personal connection because it allows individuals to meet others with similar literary interests. And it was really important to us to be able to recreate that atmosphere in a virtual environment. This is where it can be important to have another staff member participating in the chat. The moderator and co-moderator can help create connections between what participants say, linking together those who have like kindred interests or have made similar points. As I'm going to talk about here in a second, the Facebook algorithm can make it really difficult to follow the natural flow of the conversation for moderators and participants alike. So it is important for the moderators to stay on top of that. Excuse me. Being able to, like I said, follow the comment feed was difficult because of Facebook's algorithm. Facebook automatically lists their comments in terms of like relevancy or top comments, and they don't list them chronologically. You can switch though. So to follow the flow of the conversation, it was important to switch that from relevant topics or relevant comments to chronologically in the order they were posted. The people attending the book chat aren't likely to do this, but that's kind of a positive thing for them because it means they see those top comments first, and it can encourage like clusters of conversations centered on one book or theme that has been brought up. So while chronological order is best for moderators to make sure they're including everyone, the relevancy algorithm really does seem to encourage a more lively conversation among participants. Another issue for those moderating a Facebook chat is the notifications. Because so many people are chatting, notifications are constantly popping up, and sometimes it can be really hard to keep track of them. I've found that refreshing the page regularly and following comments that way is easier than following them via notifications, but it is still useful to check notifications throughout the chat to make sure you haven't missed anything. One thing to remember is to post each question as its own comment and not on a previous thread, because it inspires fresh conversation and prevents the new question from getting lost in another discussion. You also want to make sure that you are posting directly from your library's social media profile. Sometimes when you're refreshing pages, Facebook will switch you back to your personal profile. Alternatively, sometimes you may want to do double duty, participating as the library, but then commenting also as yourself. So you want to keep an eye out on which account you're posting from, because mixing the two up can cause a lot of confusion in the chat.
Thanks, Bianca. So I saw some questions come up on the chat, so we'll answer those there at the end. So thanks, Bianca. David's going to talk a little bit about the positive community engagement and successes that we've had through the course of the chat. So I'm going to hand it over to David.
Before I officially joined the virtual book chat in June, I participated as a patron. one of the things that jumped out at me right off the bat was that while we have a
David, we cannot hear you.
now,
It wouldn't be a Zoom presentation without technical difficulties, right?
While we're waiting for David to get his
Sure.
sound working, there was a question that came through from Nicolette from Jackson County, and she wanted to know if you have thought about using a Facebook room or Zoom like we are now to hold one of your chats.
We did think about Zoom. I don't know how many of you guys read the Gazette, but KCPL had a Zoom meeting hacked. And it was a not pleasant experience for everyone involved. So Zoom was kind of out after that. We were not interested in, because it was around the same time that we started the chat. So we were not interested in trying to do Zoom. We thought about Facebook Live. I thought about Instagram, knowing that I could potentially get some different people doing Instagram, but it just seemed like a lot of our patrons were doing Facebook. And then the Facebook room, I've used that actually for gaming, and it does work pretty well. So that's something that we might think about in the
I will also say, as far as like Facebook chat post chats versus Zoom chats, the good thing about the chat we have right now is that you don't have to be there right when it starts. With a video chat, you pretty much have to have it fit into your schedule. But with our chat, if you can't make it between 6 and 7 p.m. on a Friday, you get up Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and you can still join in, you can still comment, people can still come in and respond to you as well. So I think that's a real pro of hosting it in Facebook.
I think David's trying to log out and reconnect. I do have his content, so if we can't get him going here in just a moment, I can speak to what he was going to talk about. But I'm going to give it just another second to see if he can get loaded in. So just bear with us. Heather, were there any other questions maybe that we could answer so far?
Yes, there was another question from Amanda. Have you tried anything virtual for youth chats?
Our teen librarian, Andrew Stanley, is working on a book chat for teens right now. I'm not sure if he started it yet, but I know that he is interested in doing that. And I think he's probably going to use a different method. Most of his teens use Discord and some other things. So I can't really speak to the specifics, but if anybody had questions about a youth book chat in particular, you guys can get in contact with me and I can connect you with Andrew. So let's see if David's available now. All right, so I guess I can pick up on what David was going to talk about our positive engagements and successes that we've had. I'll tell you that David joined our book chat in June. He had been participating as a patron from the beginning. And David, if you get your audio working at any point, just jump in. When it became clear that I might need more than one moderator, you know, if somebody went on vacation, somebody was out or whatever, I asked David, since he had been involved since the beginning, it made sense, and he was really active in our chat. So, so one of the added benefits of doing it virtually, of course, is that we've had some people maybe who wouldn't be able to have participated before. You know, people are limited by transportation, the work hours, they can't get to chats. Most of our chats are during the day. So even myself, I was not able to participate in a book chat until pretty recently. We finally got an evening chat. So this was a great way for us to get those people. It looks like David's on the phone with probably our IT guy. You know, and they only have to put an hour aside for it, and they don't have to go anywhere. So they can log in right from home. They don't have all this driving time. Additionally, people can participate after the chat is over. So we've had people who will comment later that evening, you know, and say like, well, I couldn't join it at 6, but here I wanted to comment on this particular question. So that's been really a great experience too. And we do get those notifications. So I will see that pop up on my phone that somebody's commented on the chat. And then I can go in and still engage with them. And if they've asked a question or, you know, I can just comment on what they've said. So we do that as well. We follow up typically for at least a day or so after the chat is ended. So another positive that we've had is the quality of discussion has been really strong. We have had a great interaction, and you know, social media can be a weird thing. It isn't always the best of environments, and there isn't always positive engagement. But we have had
We had David. I think that was the echo.
All right, so I'll continue. So we were worried that we might have disruptive comments. You know, that was part of the reason for having multiple moderators as well. You know, if somebody started trying to hijack your chat more or less, then you could have somebody jump in and sort of work with that, and you wouldn't be distracted trying to facilitate the book chat. So it's been a really positive experience. Again, just by having the co-moderators, that has negated a lot of our potentially negative things. We've had really positive engagement. I'm going to give you some of the questions that we've had so you can kind of see what we're asking people, and you can see how they've you know, kind of how fun we can make it. Let me go through and read some of these. What book character have you most related to and why? Book characters are often evil. And we talk about, but they're also sometimes the most compelling, right? When you have an evil, quote unquote, evil character. So what evil book character is your favorite and why? And we got some really great responses with that. Then there was also, if you had a chance to ask your favorite character one question, what would you choose and what would you ask them? And we got a lot of great responses from that. And I can send these to anyone who's interested. I would love to help others start their own book chat. So these questions are not secret. We'll share them with others. So we also ask questions like, what book has helped you improve your understanding or shed light on a different culture? Things like that, that get people kind of thinking about what they're reading. Let's see. And so, yeah, these seem like, regular questions, but we've learned a lot about our patrons through these questions. And it's different than questions that we've had in my in-person chat experience, which is more about like the specifics of a book. Why do you think X character did this? Or, the progression of the story through the book. But this is a little bit more in depth about characters, books that you'd like to read, why you like to read them, how reading has changed your perspective. We asked people like, what was your favorite children's book? That was another question that got, book as a child. And that was one that got a lot of good response too. So this is an invitation to get to know your community better. We believe that we better know and understand the community now that we've done this book chat. It definitely has been a different experience than the in-person chats that we've had, at least from my perspective. So I'm going to talk about our turnout now. And thanks for bearing with me with going through David's content because I was not quite as familiar with it. But so we've had really consistently high turnout. Over the past 6 months, we've had 246 participants in our book chat. And as I said, we have averaged, 15 to 20 people per chat, which I think is excellent, considering, that it's online. And those are people that are actually there when we're doing it. And then we'll have extra comments after. So it's a really lively and engaging time. We average over 100 comments per chat. Some chats we've had close to 200. So it's really most of the time very fast paced. And again, that's where multiple moderators come in handy. There's no way I can do this with just myself, trying to comment on nearly 200 comments while I'm trying to ask questions during the chat. So having really good co-leaders. They started out as moderators, but they've become co-leaders. So co-leaders with your chat is a good idea. And we found that they're not only, I expected them to kind of engage with us, but they've ended up engaging with each other a whole lot. They do engage with us as presenters, but they also engage with each other, and they've gotten to know each other. We have a lot of people who come every week, and they kind of will, go back to a previous chat and talk about a book. And I know David's on mute and he can't speak to this, but there is a particular book that David is not a fan of, and many people have come to know that through the chat, and we'll kind of poke fun at him about that. So it's a fun thing. We have fun with each other while we're doing it. We did decide to change the chat from weekly to monthly once we got started and came back to work in the library. We came back to work in June. And so we did weekly book chat for April and May and the beginning of June. And then in June, when we came back to work, it was more difficult with our schedules to work out doing a weekly. Yeah, we did weekly. I see that somebody's like, weekly, that's incredible. It was weekly. So we have a lot of questions that we can forward to you guys. But we went to monthly when we came back to work because it was, as you all know, doing schedules for different departments. David works at a branch, which is only has 5 staff members. Biancas is part of our POP Mat, and I'm part of Reference, which currently has 3 people. So we, trying to work out getting time off to do chat stuff as far as, away from our regular duties. was not as easy weekly, but monthly we can make it happen. We typically only spend, 2 to 3 hours, I would say, a month working on the chat. And that's because we spend a good bit of time coming up with questions, and then we do the promotion. Investing 2 hours for such a good experience is definitely worth it. So that's why we went from weekly to monthly. It was also just getting hard to come up with so many questions weekly. I mean, it was like, we're going to run out of questions. And initially we thought COVID was not going to be 7 months in. So 7 months in, weekly doing that was going to be too much. So I'm going to let Bianca's going to talk very briefly about our kind of what we're going to do moving forward. And then we'll do just a little bit more, and then we'll be wrapping up and have time for questions.
Sorry about that. So like Ashley just said, while we were closed, we did the book chat weekly, and it was difficult to come up with, because we usually do 5 to 6 questions per chat to give people enough time to respond. And it was becoming difficult to come up with new compelling questions that we thought people would really, want to answer and want to talk about. So we did notice that participation started to decline as things began to reopen. And so that is part of why we made the move to monthly chats. People were working, people were starting to go out and do things on Friday evenings, especially in the summertime. So doing the switch to monthly has really proven to be successful on multiple fronts, because it helped give us time to come up with better questions, to prepare different marketing materials. It allows people to fit it into their schedule, both on the staff end and as people attending. And now that we're open, we're also able to promote the book chat in a new way, which is by actually talking to our patrons about it. Because I'm sure a lot of us have had patrons who they return a book, and they want to talk to you about it. They want to tell you, this is what I loved about this book. This is the kind of stuff I love to read. I love these authors, and they really they want that connection. So this virtual book chat really gives them an outlet to do that. And so we can tell them, well, you love talking about your books. Come to our virtual chat and talk to a lot of people about what you like. So going forward, like someone asked earlier, there are many options that libraries could use to recreate the virtual book chat format. Scheduled video chats, book chats catering to specific genres, discussion forums that are linked on your library's website. These are all options. The most important thing is having dedicated staff members and having the time in the schedule to do this. But because of our program being, we feel, very successful as is, our patrons seem to enjoy the current format, we will probably be sticking to the scheduled Facebook thread. Because like we said, even though it is scheduled for a specific date and time, people are encouraged to post after it's over, which means that conversation can go on for days at the leisure of the people chatting. And under current circumstances, when in-person programming is rare, this is a great way to reach out to patrons and continue a book chat for them, and to keep them interested in the library, and just keep communicating with them. Beyond the pandemic, a virtual book chat also reaches out to those who may not have the means to travel to in-person programming, those who are housebound, or those who may have social anxiety. So it includes members of the community who may not have realized they could be part of the library family in that kind of way. And of course, it also promotes the library's resources. It helps promote your social media accounts. And so because of the success of this program, we envision that it will be a permanent program for KCPL.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Bianca. So I'm going to wrap up so that we can get to questions. I wanted to just kind of highlight some of the takeaways for starting or improving your own virtual chat. So again, of course, COVID has challenged us all to come up with new and different ways to engage patrons. And I think a virtual book chat is a great way to do that in whatever format you choose. I still am sort of interested in doing Instagram, doing one on Instagram. So maybe in the future I'll do that. But I think, the Facebook method has been really successful for us. And it's also a way to allow our patrons to have a level of social interaction that a lot of people aren't getting right now. So we can see that in our book chat. People are really excited, I think more so with COVID than they would normally be, about attending a virtual book chat. So you can tell that people miss just kind of being able to talk with people. And it's an easy program to do with limited resources. So, you just have to have a Facebook page and a little bit of time to create some promotional material and come up with questions. And as I said, we typically spend, 2 hours, probably maybe at the most 3 a month, creating questions. We go back and forth with each other talking about things. So it's a really low minimal amount of time for a really great result. And then with the challenges that we potentially had, we talked about having co-leaders for your chat, I think is a way to mitigate a lot of those potential challenges. And it's just been a really positive and creative experience. It's been a more creative experience than I imagined it would be. Bianca and David are very creative. I'm a little bit more of the kind of admin sort of person. So it's been a great way for me to explore creativity and help come up with questions and get involved with coming up with answers. That's another thing I would suggest if you are a little bit more like me. I have to come up with my answers to my questions before the chat so that I'm able to continue facilitating the chat, but I also want to reply, as the library about what is my favorite character. So I prepare my answers ahead of time so that I can just pop them right into the chat and then continue interacting with folks. So that's a suggestion that I would have. And it's been a great experience, vastly different from my in-person chat experience, not necessarily better or worse, just it's different, and in a really positive way. So, and we've had great numbers. Like I said, we've had 246 participants over the course of these 6 months, I guess. We're getting ready to have our 7th one tomorrow, or 7th month tomorrow. So it has been really successful. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm sorry that David wasn't able to participate with us. As far as speaking his part, he's been a big part of the chat, and as Bianca has as well. I couldn't have done it without them for sure. We hope
I think
that
I'm
you were
actually able to talk now.
Oh, there he is!
Wow.
Right at the end. So now
Right at the end.
you get to answer all the questions. So we hope you were able to find some ideas and inspiration for your own book chat, and we're going to open the floor for questions now.
I just wanted to say that I'm sorry about that, using a laptop I'm not at all familiar with, and not sure what happened there, but didn't plan it. But remember, Teddy Claypool, that's who this was.
We got many requests in the chat for you guys to send your list of questions. Can you send that to the WVLA listserv, please?
Yes, I sure
Absolutely.
can.
It definitely goes. I see someone in the chat was talking about not using the same book. It definitely goes a lot better. It's a bigger burden on people if you're asking them to all read the same book. they have to be able to have access to it, and this just works a lot better. And it's a lot more, or a lot less challenging for people, a lot less time constraint on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people don't feel as much pressure to have read a specific title, so they feel more confident joining in on the chat because they're just able to discuss the books they have read and loved.
Hi, I was wondering if I could ask a quick question. I don't know,
Sure.
can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
I was wondering about how you advertise this type of event. You said something about you made a flyer with Canva.
Yeah, so Canva is a free web-based program, and it has templates where you can create flyers, bookmarks, posts specifically created for social media, and it's just a really good way. It's eye-catching. It's
Yeah, I've used it before. It's very handy.
yeah.
Do you just make the flyer and then post it on your Facebook page and be like, hey, join us on this day and time for a discussion about XYZ? Is that how y'all do that?
That's usually how we do it, yeah.
And it helps if you put, Ashley mentioned this earlier, but it helps if you put that link on the previous book chat comment thread, because that will send notifications through Facebook to everyone who participated the previous time. And so at least put it in their mind that the new one has started or is about to.
Do you do this as just a post on Facebook, or do you create like an event so that way you've got a link?
We usually just do it as a post. I believe in the beginning of the summer we tried to do it as an event page, but people kind of got confused. They started going back and posting on old chats. So we just felt like the format we were currently using with just a Facebook post and thread was more familiar, and people were just more comfortable with it.
And my opinion is when you do a event like that, it makes them feel more like they have to participate, and it takes away that informal aspect that appeals to the casual person just scrolling through Facebook and it happens to pop up in their feed. So this eliminates that whole responsibility aspect of this.
Yeah, and I will add to that people felt like with an event they had to register. And I think that's partly because that's how KCPL typically has done in-person programming, is you register for it for most programs. So we were getting questions about, do I have to register? How do I have to register? So I think maybe if you started out that way, that you could continue doing that. But we, we're kind of thrown into doing this pretty fast after COVID, trying to get some stuff started. So
Right, yeah.
It just confused patrons. So I think maybe if you started out doing it as an event, potentially you wouldn't have that, but we just decided that it was too confusing to change it, and we just continued the thread. And like I said, it's we've actually gone up in numbers lately rather than going down. So it seems to be working well for us.
Do you have any examples that you can screen share with us?
I don't have anything that I can screen share. This is the first presentation that I've done via Zoom, and I was like not positive about how to share my screen. And as you see, we ended up still having technical difficulties, but yeah, I'm happy to share. I'm happy to post, what flyers we've used, so you guys can kind of see how we've done it, and add some content there so that folks can refer to that.
And if anyone is free tomorrow evening at around 6 p.m. on our Kanawha County Public Library Facebook page, you can always join in on the chat yourself. So, I mean, it is really fun. we try to make it fun and interesting and like insightful questions. I mean, I love answering the questions we come up with, so I would definitely recommend attending.
Definitely love the questions. I always answer them, have it ready beforehand, because you still want to have your attention on the comments and the patrons so that you can give them the attention you deserve and you're not thinking about the answer to the question yourself. So it's definitely better to be prepared for the answer you're going to have, but it's a lot of fun. That's one of my favorite parts of it. And we get to collaborate with that, and it's a blast.
Do we have any other questions?
Did we miss any early on?
Yeah, did we miss anything on the chat?
Yes, that's what I was going back for.
Okay.
Angie asked, do you guys plan to do any collaboration, excuse me, with any of the school libraries with a virtual book chat?
That's not been something that I've thought of, to be honest. We just started back, Kanawha County, I think just went back to school this week for in-person. So I don't know, that might be something that we look to do in the future. I know our children's programming is doing virtual story times and things like that, but I haven't thought of a book chat element, but something to consider for sure.
Looks like Amanda Simmons said that she's shameless when it comes to asking people if they'd like to join a program. We are all definitely under that category too. I'm constantly spamming every Facebook friend I have with private messages while we're doing it with the link, try to shame them and guilt trip them into joining.
Sorry, I thought of something else. Do you typically gear this towards a specific age group?
I mean, we gear it towards adults, you know, but certainly we keep the content so that, you know, if a teen wanted to join, you know, it wouldn't be anything that they, you know, I think it would be applicable to, you know, teen or adult, but it is geared towards adults. And as I said, our teen librarian is considering, and I think is working on starting one too. So, so that's where we gear it towards adults.
And as far as content goes, I'm not sure if Ashley covered this when she was going over my material, but one thing we thought was going to end up happening is we were going to have to moderate a lot of potentially disruptive comments. And we ended up not having any. So, I mean, not yet. I'm sorry if I jinxed us, but. This is a lot different doing it on the phone. I was not prepared for that.
We still have a couple of minutes if anyone has questions.
About how long did it take this to really get off the ground, or was it just as soon as you started you had that much participation?
So the very first time I did it, I had, I think, 10 people join, which, you know, I was happy with that. And like I say, now 10 feels like, oh, we didn't have anybody come if I had 10 now, because we have more like 16 to 20 every week. But yeah, it was pretty, I mean, it was pretty successful from the beginning. And I think that just putting the information out on Facebook caught a lot of people, you know, who are interested in that sort of program. So.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I think it's definitely important to, you know, go to where your community or your audience is. So if your library has a bigger following on Instagram, you might want to try hosting it on Instagram instead. That way you're connecting with more people right off the bat.
That's an excellent point.
Well, I guess if we don't have any other questions, I want to thank you guys for joining us. I will follow up with Heather on getting those questions and information put up so that you guys can see them.